Hello Team Internet, I'm Stephen from Animo Cloud. In the last video I showed you how you can deploy a highly scalable Laravel application. In this video, I'll show you how you can scale your application with a few clicks, and we'll run some simple benchmarks. So let's check out this application. So here I have Laravel 8 running on top of PHP 8. I've got HTTPS enabled, I've got an SSL certificate deployed, and I'm just running a temporary URL at the minute. When your application starts to receive a lot of traffic, you have a few options to increase server capacity before you get overloaded. The most simple approach is to increase the number of cores and the amount of RAM. So you go to your server provider, you adjust the size of your server, and reboot. But there are a few problems with this approach. First is that in order for that configuration to take effect, that server reboot is required, and you'll therefore have downtime anywhere from 1 to maybe 10 minutes. And not only that, all those caches are now cold because of the reboot. So those caches in the database or Redis or memcached, those are now cold because of the reboot, and your app is potentially now slow whilst those caches warm up again. And what happens when all the traffic is now gone because it's now nighttime? Well, you need to do another reboot in order to scale back down. And because you have one server here, you have no real backup. If the server goes down, your application has gone offline. So this approach is called scaling up because we took the one server and we simply made it bigger. But there's another approach called scaling out, and I'll show you how this works in Animo. So Animo scales your application in an entirely automated way by running replicas, and replicas are copies of your service. With each replica you have, you get more performance. So here I have one replica, and I have 2 CPU cores provisioned, and I have half a gigabyte of RAM. If I, for example, increase the number of replicas to 2, then my total capacity would be 4 CPU cores and 1 gigabyte of RAM. Now, if you wanted to scale out yourself, what you would do typically is you would buy another server, install all the dependencies, install PHP, all the packages, everything that you need, set up your application on that secondary server. You now need to buy or set up another component, which is the load balancer, to sit in front of your 2 servers. You need to set up SSL on the load balancer rather than the actual end server, and then finally point your load balancer to those 2 servers. So because there's a lot of burden in managing all these components and scaling up and down, most developers provision to their worst case scenario. And what I mean by this is, if during business hours you need 10 servers to handle all the traffic, but then during the night those servers are sat mostly idle, you're paying for idle servers. And so those servers during the night are not being monetized to the same extent as they are during the day. In a few seconds with Animo, we can scale out and meet demand when we need to, and then scale back down, saving on server costs when we no longer need the capacity. So let's run a simple benchmark here. So I have one replica. I'm going to run a benchmark where we just send a ton of requests with a concurrency level of 50 to this particular application. And you can see that we achieved about 120 requests a second. Now, there's a number of important things to always look at when you're benchmarking, for example, the latency and standard deviation. But just for the purposes of this benchmark, we achieved 120 requests a second. Now, to increase the amount of capacity through Animo, I just simply increase the replicas, for example, to 2. I'm alerted that this may increase my bill because I now require more resources. Behind the scenes, Animo is finding those available CPU cores within the Animo platform. You can see that there's no reboots happening. My application is still online. I'm still accepting traffic from my customers. So that is progressing. And I'll just bring this terminal back. Okay. Within Animo, because there is a load balancer already integrated, there's no configuration needed for that. It just comes just by default, and there's no extra cost to pay. In future versions of Animo, we will have auto scaling, and that means we'll automatically scale your application according to the amount of traffic that your application receives. So you don't have to always come into Animo to adjust the number of replicas. So we can see here that it's now available. I have 2 replicas, and we'll now run another benchmark. Okay, excellent. So here we achieved about 209 requests a second, so just under a little bit just under double. There's of course a little bit of overhead in having like a load balancer, but nonetheless we managed to still dramatically increase the server capacity just with a few simple clicks. And of course, when I'm done, I can easily just scale back down and save server costs. So I hope that was interesting. If you want more information, you can check out our site at animocloud.com.